To my granddaughter, Clara. The lawyer's voice droned, devoid of any sympathy. I leave this envelope. That was it. No millions, no property, no shares in the company I had spent the last 7 years quietly saving from my father's incompetence. Just a plain white letter-sized envelope. The silence in the room lasted exactly 3 seconds before it was shattered by the sound of my sister Bella's laughter. It wasn't a polite chuckle. It was a loud, cackling release of pure, malicious delight. An envelope. Bella gasped, clutching the arm of the velvet chair as she doubled over. Oh my God, did he leave you a coupon or maybe a drawing he made? My mother, Susan, didn't even try to hide her smirk. She reached over and patted my hand, her rings cold against my skin. Don't be ungrateful, Clara. Grandpa probably left you a nice letter. Sentimental value, you know, since you were always the emotional one. I sat frozen, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I looked at the lawyer, Mr. Henderson, silently begging him to continue to say there was a mistake to say, and also $10 million. But he just closed the thick leather binder and removed his reading glasses. That concludes the reading of the last will and testament of Arthur Sterling. He said, checking his watch. Wait, I whispered, my voice trembling. That's it? My father, Robert, stood up, adjusting his silk tie. He had just inherited the entire Sterling shipping empire valued at $50 million. He looked down at me with the same expression he used when he stepped on a piece of gum. It's over, Clara. Stop making a scene. You got what you deserved. Grandpa knew who the real leaders of this family were. He knew who could handle the legacy. I handled the legacy. I stood up my chair, scraping loudly against the mahogany floor. I'm the one who fixed the supply chain issues last year. I'm the one who stayed late every night while you were playing golf. Bella doesn't even know what a logistics manifest is. I don't need to know, Bella sneered, standing up to admire her reflection in the glass cabinet. She had just inherited the Napa Valley estate and the entire jewelry collection. I hire people like you to know that for me. Oh, wait, I don't hire you. You're fired. The room spun. What? You heard her. Dad said, checking his phone, probably already looking up boat prices. This company needs fresh blood, strong leadership. We can't have resentful employees bringing down morale. You can pack your desk on Monday. Actually, security can do it for you. Just leave your badge at the front. I looked at my mother. She was busy examining the diamond bracelet Bella had just pulled out of a velvet pouch, part of her new inheritance. Mom? Oh, Clara, don't look at me like that. She sighed as if my unemployment was a minor inconvenience to her afternoon. It's for the best. You've always been so stressed. Now you can take some time off. Maybe use whatever is in that envelope to, I don't know, buy a cat. The humiliation wasn't just burning. It was scalding. It felt like acid in my veins. I looked at them, the people I had spent my entire life trying to please. I had been the good daughter. The one who studied hard, the one who worked for the family business for half the market salary, the one who nursed Grandpa when he got sick while they were vacationing in the Hamptons. And this was my reward, being laughed at in a lawyer's office while they carved up the empire I helped build. I reached out and took the envelope from the lawyer's desk. It was light, terrifyingly light. Before I tell you what was inside that envelope and how I used it to destroy every single person in this room, make sure you are subscribed. You do not want to miss the execution of this plan. I didn't say goodbye. I couldn't. I turned around and walked out of the office, the sound of their laughter following me down the hallway like a pack of hyenas. I could hear Bella's voice echoing off the walls. Post that picture of her face, Grandpa's favorite disappointment. It's going to go viral. I took the elevator down to the lobby, my legs feeling like jelly. I walked out into the gray, drizzling city rain. I didn't have a car. I took the bus to save money because Dad was always tight on cash flow for my salary, even though he leased a new Porsche every year. I stood under the awning of a coffee shop, shivering, and finally tore open the envelope. Inside there was no check, no deed to a hidden house, just 2 things. First, a plane ticket, economy class, one way to Monaco, departing tonight at 11 p.m. Second, a handwritten note on Grandpa's personal stationery. I unfolded the paper, my hands shaking so hard the words blurred. My dearest Clara, if you are reading this, I am gone. And if you are holding this envelope, it means the family has shown their true colors. I told Henderson to give you this only if your father and sister took everything and left you nothing. I prayed I was wrong about them. But I am a gambling man and I bet on human nature. They think wealth is loud. They think power is a title. You and I know better. You listened when I told you stories about the old days. You listened when everyone else was checking their watches. Go to Monaco. Take the ticket. Do not pack. Do not tell them. Go to the address on the back of this note. Ask for Julian. He is expecting you. It is time for the scapegoat to become the lion. Love, Grandpa. I stared at the note. Monaco. I had $200 in my bank account. I couldn't afford a sandwich in Monaco, let alone a hotel. But what choice did I have? I had just been fired by my own father. I was homeless, effectively, as I lived in the carriage house of the estate Bella now owned. I took the bus to the airport. I sat in the plastic chair at the gate for 4 hours watching rich business travelers in suits lounge in the first-class line while I waited to board Group 5. I looked at my phone. Instagram was blowing up. Bella had posted a photo of the three of them, Mom, Dad, and her toasting with Dom Perignon at the finest steakhouse in the city. The caption read, "New era, Sterling Empire rising. Sad that some people just couldn't make the cut. Hashtag blessed, hashtag CEO, hashtag bye Felicia." I turned my phone off. I didn't cry. I had cried enough in that office. Now I just felt a cold, hard knot forming in my stomach. A knot that felt suspiciously like hatred. The flight was 8 hours of misery. I was squeezed between a man who snored like a chainsaw and a crying baby. I didn't sleep. I stared out the window at the black ocean below, clutching that envelope like it was a lifeline. Ask for Julian. Who was Julian? A lawyer? An old friend. When I landed in Nice, the heat hit me first, then the smell of salt and money. I took the train to Monaco because I couldn't afford the helicopter transfer or a private car. I walked out of the station and into a world that made my family's wealth look like pocket change. Ferraris were as common as Toyotas here. The harbor was filled with yachts the size of office buildings. Everything sparkled. I looked at the address on the back of the note, 12 Avenue d'Ostende. I started walking. My backpack dug into my shoulders. I was wearing jeans and a wrinkled t-shirt, sweating in the Mediterranean sun. People looked at me, women in Chanel suits, men in linen blazers with a mixture of pity and disdain. I didn't belong here. I was the poor relation, the failure. The address led me away from the tourist traps up the winding roads toward the cliffs. The buildings got grander, more imposing. Finally, I stopped in front of a massive pair of wrought iron gates. It wasn't a house. It was a private bank, Banque Privée Sterling Lynch. I checked the note again. Sterling, my last name. But my grandfather's business was shipping, not banking. We didn't own banks in Monaco. This had to be a coincidence. I walked up to the security guard at the gate. He was dressed better than my father at a wedding. He looked me up and down, his nose wrinkling slightly. "Can I help you, mademoiselle? Deliveries are around the back." "I'm not a delivery," I said, my voice raspy from lack of water. I'm here to see Julian." The guard raised an eyebrow. "Monsieur Julian is the director of the institution. He does not see people without an appointment, and certainly not—" He gestured vaguely at my backpack. "My grandfather sent me," I said, pulling out the crumpled note, "Arthur Sterling." The guard's demeanor didn't shift. He looked bored. "Many people claim to know Mr. Sterling. Please move along before I call the police." "Call Julian," I snapped, surprising myself. "Just tell him Clara is here. If he says no, I'll leave. But you better ask him first." The guard sighed, clearly annoyed, and pressed a button on his earpiece. He spoke rapidly in French, his eyes never leaving my face. Then he stopped. His eyes went wide. He stood up straighter. Oui tout de suite, monsieur." He pressed a button, and the massive iron gates began to swing open. The guard stepped aside, bowing his head low. "Apologies, Mademoiselle Sterling. Please, Go straight to the main door. He is coming down to meet you." I walked up the marble driveway, my sneakers squeaking. The main doors of the bank, massive oak slabs with gold handles, burst open before I even reached them. A man stepped out. He was young, maybe 30, with dark hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. He was wearing a navy suit that fit him perfectly. He didn't look like a stuffy banker. He looked capable, dangerous even. He ran down the steps, bypassing the waiting staff, and stopped right in front of me. He looked at my tired face, my dusty clothes, the envelope in my hand, and then he smiled. It was the warmest thing I had seen in days. "Clara," he said, his voice deep and smooth. "You look exactly like him." "You're Julian." "I am," he said. He didn't offer a handshake. Instead, he gestured to the open door. "Welcome home." "Home?" I asked, following him into a lobby that looked more like a cathedral. "I don't understand. Why did Grandpa send me here? What is this place?" Julian led me past gaping employees straight into a private elevator. He pressed the button for the penthouse floor. "Your grandfather was a brilliant man, Clara, but he was also a paranoid one. He knew your father was incompetent. He knew your mother was greedy, and he knew your sister was, well, let's say easily influenced. So? Julian continued as the elevator rose smoothly. "Years ago, Arthur began moving his personal assets out of the U.S. He divested from the shipping company, slowly reinvesting the profits into high-yield private equity real estate and currency markets through this institution. He let your father keep the shipping company because it kept him busy. It made him feel important. But the shipping company is a shell, Clara. It's debt-ridden and outdated." The elevator doors opened. We stepped into an office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire Principality of Monaco. The ocean glittered below. "I don't understand," I said, dropping my backpack on a leather sofa. "If Dad got the company, what did I get?" Julian walked to a massive safe in the wall. He spun the dial, the heavy mechanism clicking loudly in the silent room. He pulled out a thick black portfolio and placed it on the desk in front of me. "Open it." I approached the desk. My hands were trembling again. I opened the leather cover. The first page was a deed of trust, the Phoenix Trust, beneficiary Clara Sterling. "What is this?" I asked. "This," Julian said, standing beside me, "is the holding company that owns this bank. It also owns significant real estate in London, Tokyo, and New York. It holds the controlling interest in a pharmaceutical conglomerate and a tech firm in Silicon Valley." He flipped the page to the financial summary. "Arthur didn't leave you money, Clara," Julian said softly. "He left you the empire, the real empire." I looked at the bottom line. I blinked. I rubbed my eyes and looked again. Total assets under management, $3,240,000,000. $3.2 billion. I gasped, the air sucked out of my lungs. I grabbed the edge of the desk to keep from falling. This is a mistake. Dad got $50 million. Bella got the house. How can I? "Your father got the crumbs," Julian said, his voice hard. "He got the shiny toys that lose value. You got the machine that makes the money. Your grandfather built this for you. He watched you work. He watched you suffer. He told me, 'Julian, she is the only one who understands the value of a dollar because she is the only one who ever had to work for it.'" I stared at the number. $3.2 billion. Yesterday, I was worried about paying my phone bill. Today, I could buy the phone company. "Why?" I whispered, tears finally spilling over. "Why didn't he tell me?" "Because you weren't ready," Julian said. "He needed you to see them, to really see them. He needed them to break your heart so that you wouldn't hesitate when the time came to do what must be done." I looked up at him. "What do you mean?" Julian tapped a file on the desk. "Your father's shipping company, the one he is so proud of, it's hemorrhaging money. He has cooked the books to hide about $20 million in losses. He is currently looking for a buyer to bail him out before the feds catch on. He's desperate." My mind flashed back to the office. The laughter. "Enjoy your little vacation." Street garbage. "He's looking for a buyer," I asked, my voice changing. The sadness was evaporating, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. "Yes," Julian said, watching me closely. "He has an offer on the table from a competitor. If he sells to them, he walks away with a golden parachute and retires rich. He gets away with everything." I looked at the view of Monaco. I looked at the billions in the ledger. And then I thought of my father's arrogance. I thought of Bella throwing me out of the house. I thought of my mother telling me to buy a cat. I turned to Julian. "Can we stop the sale?" Julian smiled, a predatory glint in his eyes. "We can do better than stop it. We can buy the debt. We can become the primary creditor. And once we own the debt, we own the company, and we own them." I ran my hand over the leather portfolio. The scapegoat was dead. "Julian," I said, standing up straighter than I ever had in my life, "get the paperwork ready. I want to buy my father's company, but I don't want him to know it's me. Not yet." "And the name of the purchasing entity?" Julian asked, pen poised. I thought about the family that had thrown me away like trash. "Nemesis Holdings," I said. "Call it Nemesis Holdings. Nemesis Holdings." Julian repeated the name, rolling off his tongue with a dangerous sort of elegance. He didn't question it. He didn't ask if I was sure. He simply opened a fresh file on his tablet and tapped the screen. "An excellent choice, Clara. Fitting. The goddess of divine retribution." For the next 3 days, I didn't leave the penthouse suite of the Banque Privée Sterling Lynch. I couldn't. Not because I was trapped, but because I was being educated. If I was going to take down my father, a man who had spent 30 years bullying his way through boardrooms, I needed to understand exactly how he had failed. And the extent of his failure was catastrophic. Julian and a team of forensic accountants laid it all out for me on the massive screens in the conference room. It was like watching a slow-motion car crash. My father, the great Robert Sterling, wasn't a businessman. He was a gambler with a losing streak. The shipping company, the one he claimed was worth $50 million, was actually leveraging debt to pay off other debt. He had mortgaged the fleet to pay for the warehouse expansion, then mortgaged the warehouses to pay for his personal lifestyle. The profit he showed the shareholders was a fiction created by moving money between shell companies, a classic Ponzi scheme in corporate clothing. He was weeks away from defaulting on a massive loan from a commercial bank in New York. "This is the leverage point," Julian said, pointing to a red line on the graph. "The sovereign bank loan, $40 million. It matures in 10 days. He doesn't have the cash to pay it, and because of his credit rating, he can't refinance. That's why he's desperate to sell to this competitor. He needs the buyout cash to cover this loan before the bank seizes the ships." I stared at the numbers. "If the bank seizes the ships, the company collapses." "Correct," Julian said. "And Robert goes to prison for fraud because the audit will reveal the cooked books." I leaned back in the leather chair. "I don't want him in prison yet. That's too easy. I want him to feel it. I want him to sit in that office and realize he's lost everything." I looked at Julian. "Can we buy the sovereign bank loan?" Julian smiled. "Distressed debt acquisition. It's a specialty of ours. We can approach Sovereign Bank tomorrow. They'll be happy to offload a risky loan for 90 cents on the dollar. Once Nemesis Holdings owns that debt, your father owes you the $40 million. And since he can't pay, I can call the loan," I finished, "and force the company into administration." And as the primary creditor, Julian added, "You would have the right to seize control of all assets. The ships, the brand, the contracts. You wouldn't just be the owner, you'd be the executioner." "Do it," I said. "Buy the loan and buy the mortgage on the Napa estate too." Julian paused, tapping his stylus against his chin. "Ah, the estate. That's even more interesting. Your sister, Bella, inherited the house, correct? But she didn't inherit the maintenance fund because your mother took the cash. Property taxes on an estate that size are roughly $200,000 a year. They are 6 months overdue. The county is already threatening a lien." I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Bella probably thinks property taxes are something poor people pay. Buy the tax lien. I want the house, the company, the cars. I want the very ground they stand on." Once the orders were given, the atmosphere in the penthouse shifted. The business was in motion, invisible mechanisms grinding toward my family's destruction. Now Julian turned his attention to me. He walked around the conference table and looked me up and down, his expression critical but kind. I was still wearing my worn-out jeans and the hoodie I'd flown in with. My hair was pulled back in a messy bun. I looked like exactly what I was, a tired, overworked woman who had been fired by her own father. If you were going to be the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar holding company, Julian said gently, you need to look the part. Not for them, for you. You need armor. The next 24 hours were a blur of transformation. Julian didn't send me to a mall. He brought the designers to the bank. A team of stylists, tailors, and consultants took over the guest suite. It wasn't about vanity. It was about shedding the skin of the scapegoat. For years, I had dressed to be invisible, to take up as little space as possible, so I wouldn't be a target for my mother's criticism or Bella's mockery. I wore gray, beige, shapeless things. Now they draped me in structure. Italian wool, French silk, sharp lines that commanded attention. I looked in the mirror when they were done. The woman staring back wasn't the Clara who cried in the lawyer's office. She was taller, sharper. Her hair was cut into a sleek dark bob that framed a face which had finally stopped apologizing. I wore a tailored black suit that cost more than my father's car, and on my wrist was a vintage Cartier watch from my grandfather's vault. You look like him, Julian said softly, standing behind me in the reflection. Arthur would be terrified of you right now. Good, I said, smoothing the lapel of my jacket. I need to go back, Julian. He frowned. You don't need to be there in person, Clara. We can execute the takeover remotely. We can serve the eviction notices via courier. Going back, it exposes you to them. I have to go back, I insisted. I need to know. I need to know if there is anything left worth saving. Maybe if I stand in front of them not as the billionaire owner of their debt, but just as their daughter. Maybe they'll show some remorse. Maybe they'll realize they went too far. Julian looked skeptical, but he nodded. The test of character. Very well, but you are not going back unprotected. I'm coming with you, and we are taking the jet. The flight back to the States was the polar opposite of my journey to Monaco. We flew on a Gulfstream G650 that belonged to the trust. I drank vintage champagne and ate caviar while reviewing the acquisition documents. Nemesis Holdings had successfully purchased the sovereign bank loan that morning. Technically, I already owned my father's fate. He just didn't know it yet. We landed at a private airfield 20 minutes from the city. A black SUV was waiting. But before we got in, I stopped. I opened my bag and pulled out my old, worn-out hoodie and jeans. Clara, Julian asked, pausing by the car door, if I walk in wearing a $5,000 suit, they'll treat me differently because of the money. I said, pulling the hoodie over my head. I need to see how they treat me, the real me, the one they think has nothing. I scrubbed the expensive makeup off my face. I messed up my hair. I put on my old sneakers. The transformation back to poor Clara was painful but necessary. Julian watched me with a mixture of admiration and sadness. He changed into a simple gray suit, ditching his tie to play the role of a concerned friend or perhaps a public defender. Drive us to the estate, I told the driver. But park down the road. We'll walk to the gate. It was raining when we arrived, a dreary, cold drizzle that matched my mood. The Napa estate was glowing with lights. Cars lined the long driveway, Mercedes, Porsches, Bentleys. I could hear the music thumping from the main house. It was a party. What is the occasion? Julian asked quietly as we walked up the wet asphalt. Knowing them, I muttered. They're celebrating the sale. Dad probably thinks he closed the deal with the mystery buyer today. We reached the front entrance. I hesitated. My heart was pounding, not with fear this time, but with a strange, heavy anticipation. I was holding the grenade pin, and I was about to walk into the bunker. I rang the doorbell. A hired server opened it, looking confused at my appearance. Deliveries are in the back, miss. I'm not a delivery, I said, pushing past him. I'm family. I stepped into the grand foyer. It was packed. My father had invited everyone, his business rivals. The country club set the local politicians. He was holding court in the center of the room, a glass of scotch in one hand, looking flushed and triumphant. My mother was showing off her new diamond bracelet to a group of women who looked like plastic surgeons' mannequins. Bella was near the DJ booth taking selfies. The music died down as people noticed me. A hush spread through the room. I stood there dripping wet in my old hoodie and jeans with Julian standing silently a step behind me. I looked like a ghost haunting their victory lap. Clara. My mother's voice cut through the silence. She didn't sound happy. She sounded horrified. What on earth are you doing here? You're soaking wet. You're dripping on the Persian rug. My father turned his face, darkening. I thought you were in Monaco. Did you run out of money already? It's been 3 days. I came to talk, Dad. I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline. I wanted to see you. I wanted to ask if we could start over. The will reading, it was harsh, but we're still family. Bella laughed, walking over with her phone recording. Oh my God, this is pathetic. Did you seriously fly all the way back to beg? Did the envelope not have enough cash for a return ticket? I'm not begging, I said, looking at her. I'm giving you a chance, all of you, a chance to be decent. Decent. My father scoffed, stepping closer. He smelled of expensive scotch and arrogance. Let me tell you what's decent, Clara. Decency is knowing when you're not wanted. Decency is not embarrassing your family in front of the city's elite. I am about to close the biggest deal of my life. I am selling the company for $45 million. I am finally free of the dead weight, and that includes you. You haven't signed the deal yet, Robert. Julian spoke up, his voice calm but projecting clearly across the room. My father looked at Julian, sneering. Who is this, your public defender, or did you pick up a stray boyfriend in the unemployment line? I'm a friend, Julian said, and I'm advising you to listen to your daughter. I don't listen to failures, Dad spat. He turned to the crowd, raising his voice. Everyone apologies for the interruption. My daughter seems to be having a mental breakdown. She's always been the unstable one. Jealousy is an ugly thing, isn't it? The crowd laughed. It was that polite, cruel laughter of people who are glad they aren't the ones being targeted. Mom. I looked at her. Please. Susan sighed, signaling to the security guard by the door. Clara, you're making a scene. If you need money for a hostel, we can discuss it tomorrow. But right now, you need to leave. You don't fit in here. Look at you. You look like street garbage. Street garbage. The words hung in the air, the final severing of the tie. I felt the last tiny thread of hope snap inside my chest. It didn't hurt. It felt clean. I looked at Julian. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. The test was over. They had failed. I'm sorry you feel that way, I said softly. I reached into my wet pocket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. It wasn't the eviction notice, not yet. It was just a business card. Nemesis Holdings. I placed it on the side table next to a vase of white roses. I won't bother you again, I said. Enjoy the party. Celebrate while you can. Get her out of here, Bella shrieked. She's ruining my vibe. The security guard grabbed my arm. Let's go, miss. I shook him off. Don't touch me. I know the way out. I turned and walked back into the rain, Julian at my side. We walked down the driveway in silence until we reached the black SUV. The music from the house was pumping again, the laughter resuming as if I had never existed. I climbed into the back seat of the car and peeled off the wet hoodie. Underneath, I was wearing a silk camisole. I reached for the towel Julian offered me. Are you okay? He asked. I'm perfect, I said. My voice was ice cold. They called me garbage. They called me unstable. They think they're selling the company for $45 million. I looked back at the glowing mansion on the hill. Julian, I said, call the board of Sterling Shipping, call the shareholders, schedule an emergency meeting for 9 a.m. tomorrow. And the agenda, hostile takeover, I said, and tell the bank to freeze the accounts. I want my father's credit cards to decline before he even wakes up for his hangover coffee. And the house, foreclose on it, I said. Tonight. Post the notice on the gate after the last guest leaves. I want Bella to wake up to a sheriff's deputy on her doorstep. I sat back as the car pulled away, the rain streaking the windows. I wasn't Clara, the daughter, anymore. I wasn't the girl who begged for scraps of affection. The sun rose over the city of Seattle like a judge's gavel, striking the horizon cold, bright, and final. From the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse suite at the Four Seasons, where Julian had set up our temporary command center, I watched the city wake up. Somewhere down there in the sprawling estate on the hill, my family was waking up too. They were probably nursing hangovers from their premature victory party, dreaming of the $45 million they believed would hit their accounts by noon. They didn't know that the money wasn't coming. They didn't know that the only thing heading their way was an avalanche. "It's done," Julian said, walking into the room with a tablet in his hand. He looked as fresh as if he hadn't spent the entire night coordinating with legal teams across 3 time zones. At 6 o'clock, AM Sharp Nemesis Holdings exercised its rights as the primary creditor of Sterling Shipping. We formally called the loan. I turned away from the window, sipping my black coffee, and the personal accounts, frozen. Julian confirmed with a satisfied nod. "Your father listed himself as a personal guarantor on the sovereign bank loan 3 years ago, a desperate move to keep the credit line open. It gave us the legal leverage to petition for an immediate freeze of his personal assets, pending a solvency hearing. His credit cards, his checking accounts, his investment portfolios, they are all locked. And the house, the tax lien was purchased by our shell company at midnight. The foreclosure notice was filed electronically at 12:01 a.m. The sheriff's department has been notified to serve the eviction warning this morning. Technically, they have 30 days to vacate, but since Bella has been using the property for commercial purposes, her influencer events without a permit, we expedited a cease and desist, which effectively shuts down the estate." I walked over to the table where a layout of the Sterling Shipping boardroom was displayed. "They're going to panic." "Panic is the point," Julian said, placing a heavy cardstock invitation on the table. "They need to be desperate when they walk into that boardroom. They need to believe that this meeting is their only salvation." My phone buzzed. I didn't need to look to know who it was, but I checked anyway. 5 missed calls from my mother, 3 from Bella, 1 text from my father. Pick up the phone. "There's been a banking error." "Let them ring," I said, silencing the device. "It's time to get dressed." Across town, the chaos was unfolding exactly as I had choreographed it. Robert Sterling stood at the counter of his favorite artisanal coffee shop in downtown Seattle, the one where the barista usually had his double-shot espresso ready before he even walked in. Today, however, the transaction was taking longer than usual. "I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling," the young barista said, looking embarrassed. "It says declined. Maybe Chip read error. It's a Platinum Amex." Robert snapped, tapping the card on the reader aggressively. "It has no limit. Try it again." The machine beeped a harsh rejection tone. "Declined contact issuer." "This is ridiculous." Robert huffed, fishing a different card from his wallet, a corporate Visa. He swiped it. Declined. A line was forming behind him. People were whispering. Robert Sterling, the tycoon, couldn't buy a $6 coffee. His face flushed a deep, angry crimson. He threw a $20 bill, one of the few pieces of cash he carried onto the counter, and stormed out without waiting for his change. He got into his Porsche, his hands shaking with rage. He dialed his personal banker. "Voicemail," he screamed at the dashboard. "Why is everyone going to voicemail?" His phone rang, but it wasn't the banker. It was Bella. "Dad," she was screaming, her voice shrill with hysteria. "Dad, there are cops at the gate. They're putting a sticker on the intercom. They say they're serving an eviction notice. Do something." "Calm down, Bella," Robert barked, merging into traffic and nearly clipping a taxi. "It's a mistake. It's all a clerical error. The bank probably froze the system to prepare for the wire transfer. The $45 million is coming in today. The system gets glitchy when that much liquidity moves around. They said Nemesis Holdings owns the house, Dad, who is Nemesis Holdings." "The buyer," Robert yelled. "They're the ones buying the company. They must have bought the debt on the house too as part of the package. It's just aggressive corporate restructuring. I'll clear it up at the meeting. Just lock the gate and don't let them in." He hung up, sweating. It had to be a mistake, or maybe it was a power play. Yes, that was it. These international investors were trying to rattle him before the final signature, trying to see if he would crack. He wouldn't crack. He was Robert Sterling. He had built this empire, or at least he had sat in the chair while his father built it, and that was basically the same thing. He pulled up to the Sterling shipping headquarters. The glass building gleamed in the sunlight, a monument to his ego. But as he walked through the lobby, something felt wrong. The receptionist didn't smile. The security guards were standing a little straighter, their eyes tracking him with a strange intensity. He took the private elevator to the top floor. Susan was already there, pacing the hallway outside the boardroom, clutching her Hermes bag. "Robert, my card was declined at the spa," she hissed, grabbing his arm. "And Bella is texting me about the sheriff. What is going on?" "It's the transition," Robert lied, smoothing his tie. "The accounts are changing hands. It's standard procedure during a merger of this size. Once I sign the papers at this meeting, everything unlocks, plus the $45 million. "It better," Susan said, her eyes narrowing, "because I have a deposit down on a villa in Tuscany for next month." "Relax, Susan. We're about to be richer than we've ever been. Just smile and let me do the talking." I watched them on the security feed from the laptop in the limo. Julian and I were parked 2 blocks away waiting for the signal. "They're in," Julian said, watching Robert and Susan enter the boardroom. "And look, the sharks are circling." Inside the boardroom, the atmosphere was funereal. The long mahogany table was occupied by the minority shareholders, the board of directors, and the legal counsel for the mystery buyer. But the head chair, my father's chair, was empty. Robert strode in, Susan trailing behind him, and headed straight for the head of the table. But before he could sit, a man in a gray suit, one of Julian's operatives, stepped forward. "I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling," the operative said smoothly. "That seat is reserved for the CEO. I am the CEO." Robert laughed, though the sound was brittle. "Until the ink is dry, I still run this ship." "Actually, nah," the operative said, gesturing to a seat on the side. "According to the bylaws, once the company enters receivership due to default, the executive powers are suspended. Please take a seat over there." "Receivership?" Robert's face went pale. "Default? What are you talking about?" "We're here to sign the acquisition deal." "Please sit down, Mr. Sterling. The owner of Nemesis Holdings will explain everything shortly." Robert sat his legs feeling like lead. He looked around the table. The other board members refused to meet his eyes. They knew. They had been briefed an hour ago. They knew about the embezzlement, the cooked books, the debt. They were just here to watch the execution. "Where is he?" Robert muttered to Susan. "This buyer, this Nemesis guy." "Maybe he's foreign," Susan whispered. "They run on different schedules." Minutes ticked by. 10, 20. The silence in the room grew heavy, suffocating. Robert checked his watch. He checked his phone. Still frozen. Then at exactly 9:30 a.m., my phone buzzed in the limo. "It's time," Julian said. I took a deep breath. I looked at my reflection in the darkened window. The black suit was sharp, intimidating. My hair was perfect. But it wasn't the clothes that made me ready. It was the fire in my gut. The memory of the envelope. The memory of the laughter. "Let's go," I said. The limo pulled up to the front entrance. This time I didn't use the servants' entrance. I didn't use the side door. I walked right through the main revolving doors. The lobby fell silent. Employees who had known me for years, who had seen me fetching coffee, organizing files, being treated like an intern, stopped and stared. They didn't recognize me at first. I walked with a purpose that Clara the scapegoat never possessed. Julian walked beside me carrying the black portfolio. We took the elevator up. The numbers climbed. 10, 20, 30. The doors opened on the executive floor. The hallway was empty, cleared by security. We walked toward the double mahogany doors of the boardroom. I could hear my father's voice from inside, rising in panic. "This is unacceptable. We had a deal. If this buyer doesn't show up in 5 minutes, I'm walking out." I reached for the handles. Julian put a hand on my shoulder. "Are you ready?" he asked. "I've been ready for 26 years, I replied. I pushed the doors open. They swung wide with a heavy, expensive thud. Every head in the room turned. My father was standing up mid-shout, his finger pointing at the empty head chair. My mother was applying lipstick, trying to look bored. Bella, who had apparently rushed over from the house, was huddled in the corner chair, scrolling frantically on her phone. Robert froze. He blinked. He squinted. For a moment, he didn't process what he was seeing. He saw a woman in a $5,000 bespoke suit. He saw a woman radiating power and wealth. He saw a stranger. And then he saw my eyes. Clara. He whispered the name, coming out like a question he didn't want answered. I didn't speak. I didn't smile. I walked past him, the heels of my shoes clicking rhythmically on the hardwood floor. Click, click, click. The sound of a countdown. I walked straight to the head of the table, the chair that had been denied to him. The operative pulled it out for me. I sat down. I placed my hands on the table, interlaced my fingers, and looked at my family. You're late, I said, my voice calm, cool, and echoing in the dead silence of the room. What is this? Robert stammered, looking from me to Julian to the board members. Clara, get out of that chair. You're embarrassing yourself again. Security. He turned to the door, expecting the guards to rush in. The guards were there, standing like statues. They didn't move. They were looking at me. Security works for the company, Robert, I said. And since this morning, I am the company. You. Susan laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. You're the company, Clara, honey. Did you spend your grandpa's little allowance on a new outfit? You look nice, but this is a business meeting. Adults are talking. The allowance, Julian said, stepping forward and opening the black portfolio on the table, was a capitalized trust fund valued at $3.2 billion, and Nemesis Holdings, the entity that just bought your debt, foreclosed on your house, and froze your assets. Julian slid a single document down the long table. It spun perfectly, coming to a stop right in front of my father. Nemesis Holdings is Clara Sterling, Julian finished. The room seemed to tilt. I watched the blood drain from my father's face. It didn't just fade, it vanished, leaving him looking gray and old. He looked down at the document. He read the name. Clara Sterling, sole proprietor. No, he wheezed. No, that's impossible. You're street garbage, I suggested helpfully. I believe that was the term you used last night, or was it unstable? It's hard to keep track of the insults. This is a joke, Bella said, standing up her phone recording. This is some kind of prank show, right? Where are the cameras? There are no cameras, Bella, I said, turning my gaze to her. But there is a sheriff at the estate right now, changing the locks. I suggest you put the phone down before I sue you for recording in a confidential board meeting. Bella dropped the phone. Robert, I said, turning back to my father. Sit down. Sit down. I slammed my hand on the table. The sound cracked like a whip. My father collapsed into his chair. He looked small. For the first time in my life, he looked terrified of me. We have business to discuss, I said, opening the file in front of me. Specifically the $20 million you embezzled from the company accounts over the last 5 years. The fraud, the tax evasion, and of course the severance package. Severance. Susan perked up, grasping at straws. We get a severance package. I smiled. It was the smile of the lion my grandfather had told me to become. No, Mother, I said softly. You misunderstand. I'm not paying you to leave. I'm deciding whether or not to send you to prison. Prison. My father repeated the word as if it were a foreign concept, something that happened to other people, to poor people, not to Robert Sterling. He tried to laugh, but it came out as a wet, strangulated cough. You can't send me to prison, Clara. I'm your father. And besides, corporate mismanagement isn't a crime. It's bad luck. Mismanagement is bad luck. I agreed, leaning back in the leather chair that fit me perfectly. But falsifying federal maritime logs to hide the fact that 3 of your ships have been scrapped for metal while you were still claiming maintenance costs on them, that's fraud, Robert. That's a felony. And since you used those falsified assets to secure the loan from Sovereign Bank, the loan I now own, that's bank fraud too. I nodded to Julian. He tapped his tablet and the large screen behind me illuminated. It wasn't a graph this time. It was a series of scanned documents, invoices, emails, signatures. We call this the Ghost Fleet file. Julian said, his voice carrying to the back of the room where the stunned board members watched in silence. For 5 years, Robert Sterling has been billing the company for repairs on the SS Horizon, the SS Venture, and the SS Legacy. However, satellite records and scrapyard receipts show these vessels were dismantled in India in 2019. The maintenance money. I continued locking eyes with my father, didn't go to mechanics. It went to a shell company in the Cayman Islands called Blue Wave Consulting. And the sole signatory on Blue Wave... Julian swiped the screen. My father's signature appeared magnified 10 feet tall. "That's a lie," Robert screamed, standing up and slamming his hands on the table. I was advised to do that. It was a tax strategy. It was embezzlement. I corrected him calmly, to the tune of $22 million. Money you used to lease the Porsche to buy Susan's jewelry to fund Bella's influencer lifestyle. You gutted Grandpa's legacy to buy shiny trash. The board members were whispering furiously now. The lawyer for the company, my father's old golf buddy, was pale, hurriedly shoving papers into his briefcase, as if he could physically distance himself from the crime. "Now," I said, closing the file in front of me, "here's the situation. Nemesis Holdings has already turned this evidence over to the SEC and the district attorney. The investigation is formally open as of 8 a.m. this morning. You turned me in." Robert slumped back into his chair, his eyes wide and watery. "Clara, I'm your dad. How could I? I asked, feeling a cold, hard anger rising in my chest. "You fired me. You mocked me. You told me I was garbage while you were stealing millions from the company I was trying to save. You didn't act like a father, Robert. You acted like a parasite." "But prison," he whimpered. "I can't go to prison. I'm 60 years old. I have high blood pressure." "You should have thought about that before you signed the fraudulent loan applications," I said. "But don't worry, you won't be going to prison today. Today you're just going to be homeless." Bella, who had been staring at the floor, suddenly snapped her head up. "Homeless? What do you mean, homeless? You can't kick us out of the estate. I have a brand partnership event hosted there next week. People are flying in." "Julian," I said. Julian walked around the table and stopped in front of Bella. He held out a single sheet of paper. It was thick, heavy, and stamped with the official seal of the King County Sheriff's Department. "This is a writ of possession," Julian explained politely. "As Clara mentioned, Nemesis Holdings purchased the tax lien on the Napa estate. Since the property taxes were 3 years delinquent, and the mortgage, which we also purchased, was in default, we foreclosed. The grace period expired at midnight." Bella snatched the paper, her acrylic nails tearing the edge. You bought the house. My house." "It was never your house," I said. "It was Grandpa's house. You just occupied it. And you treated it like a hotel. You didn't pay the taxes. You didn't maintain the roof. You just threw parties and took pictures." "But where are we supposed to go?" Bella shrieked, her voice cracking. "I can't live in an apartment. I have followers. I have an image." "I suggest you update your followers," I said. "Maybe do a Get Ready With Me eviction edition, because the sheriff is currently changing the locks. Anything you didn't bring with you this morning is now the property of Nemesis Holdings. We'll have a moving crew pack your personal effects clothing and toiletries only and have them sent to a storage unit. You can pick up the key, well, whenever you can afford the rental fee." "You can't do this." Susan stood up, her face a mask of crumbling plaster. The arrogance was gone, replaced by pure, unadulterated panic. She looked at Robert, who was useless, and then she looked at me. She switched tactics instantly, her eyes softened tears welling up on command. She rounded the table, arms outstretched. "Clara." She choked out, her voice trembling. "Baby, please, you're upset. We understand, we hurt your feelings, but this is destroying your family. We're your flesh and blood. I'm your mother. I held you when you were a baby. I raised you." She reached for my hand. I didn't flinch. I didn't pull away. I just looked at her hand, the hand that had dismissed me 1,000 times, the hand that had waved me away like a servant, and then I looked into her eyes. "You didn't raise me, Susan." I said, my voice barely above a whisper, yet it silenced the room. You tolerated me. You raised Bella. You raised a golden child. Me. You treated me like hired help that you couldn't legally fire. You laughed when I got an envelope. You told me to go buy a cat because I was going to be alone. I was joking. She cried, a tear tracking through her foundation. It was just a joke. And this, I said, gesturing to the boardroom, to the lawyers, to the evidence of their ruin, is the punchline. Do not touch me. She froze her hand, hovering inches from my arm. She saw the look in my eyes, a look of absolute terrifying indifference, and she stepped back. She realized finally that the emotional manipulation bank account was overdrawn. Security, I called out. The two guards by the door stepped forward. They were men I had known for years, men I had brought coffee to on cold mornings. They looked at me with respect, not fear. Yes, Miss Sterling, the head guard, Mike, asked. Please escort these former employees off the premises, I said. Their access badges are deactivated. They are not permitted to return to the building without legal counsel. If they cause a scene in the lobby, call the police. Clara, Robert shouted, finding his voice one last time as Mike took his arm. You're making a mistake. You need me. You don't know how to run this company. It's a shark tank out there. I stood up. I smoothed the lapel of my jacket. I picked up the black portfolio that held the deed to an empire he could only dream of. You're right, Dad, I said. It is a shark tank, but you forgot one thing. I leaned in close so only he could hear. I'm the shark. Mike pulled him away. Let's go, Mr. Sterling. Don't make this harder than it is. I watched them go. It wasn't a triumphant march. It was pathetic. Robert was shouting threats that had no teeth. Susan was sobbing, asking about her Tuscan villa. Bella was typing furiously on her phone, probably trying to spin the narrative before the truth came out. The door swung shut behind them. The boardroom was silent. The remaining directors looked at me nervously. They were wondering if they were next. I turned to them. Gentlemen, ladies, the previous management was corrupt, inefficient, and legally compromised. That ends today. Nemesis Holdings is injecting $100 million of liquidity into Sterling Shipping, effective immediately to stabilize operations. No employees will be laid off except those complicit in the fraud. We are going to rebuild this company the way Arthur Sterling intended. Honest work, real value. I looked at the head of operations. Jim, I want a full audit of the fleet by Monday. Jim nodded, looking relieved. Yes, Miss Sterling, absolutely. Good, meeting adjourned. I walked out of the boardroom, Julian right beside me. We walked down the hallway, not toward the elevator, but toward the corner office, my father's office. I pushed the door open. It smelled of stale cigar smoke and ego. I walked to the desk, picked up the brass nameplate that read, Robert Sterling, CEO, and dropped it into the trash can. Did that feel as good as you thought it would? Julian asked, leaning against the door frame, a small smile playing on his lips. I looked out the window. From here I could see the harbor. I could see the ships that now belong to me really belong to me, not just on paper. It didn't feel good, I said honestly. It felt correct. It felt like balancing an equation. That is the best kind of victory, Julian said. Emotional victories fade, logical ones last. 6 months later. The wind on the balcony of the Sterling HQ was cold, carrying the scent of the ocean, but I didn't mind. I wrapped my cashmere coat tighter around me and took a sip of tea. Below me, the shipyard was bustling. The SS Arthur, the flagship vessel I had commissioned with the new capital, was being christened today. It was a state-of-the-art container ship, eco-friendly, efficient. Everything my father had said was too expensive to build. The company's stock was up 40%. We were solvent. We were respected. The press is waiting downstairs, Julian said, stepping out onto the balcony. He handed me a tablet. And here is the update you asked for. I looked at the screen. It was a report from the private investigator I kept on retainer, not to harass my family, but to ensure they never came close enough to hurt me again. Subject Robert Sterling. Status currently residing at the County Detention Center. Trial set for next month. The public defender is negotiating a plea deal for 5 years in minimum security. He spends his commissary money on playing cards. Subject Susan Sterling. Status living in a 1-bedroom motel in Reno. Working part-time as a greeter at a chain restaurant. attempted to sell her jewelry collection but discovered most of the pieces Robert gave her were high-quality fakes. Subject Bella Sterling. Status social media accounts deactivated after the homeless rant went viral and backfired. Currently working as a shift supervisor at a retail clothing store in Ohio. She goes by Isabella now and dyes her hair brown to avoid recognition. I handed the tablet back to Julian. Ohio. Cost of living is low. Julian shrugged. And nobody there knows who she is. It's a fresh start. Maybe it will be good for her. Maybe, I said. I didn't wish them harm anymore. I didn't wish them anything. They were just characters in a book I had finished reading. I had closed the cover and put it on the shelf. You have a visitor, Julian said softly. The christening ceremony starts in 10 minutes. I'm ready, I said. I turned to look at him. Julian. He had been my lawyer, my advisor, my sword, and my shield. But in the last 6 months, he had become something more. Not a lover, we were too busy building an empire for that, though who knew what the future held but a partner, a true equal. Thank you, Julian, I said, for the envelope, for waiting for me. I didn't wait for you, Clara, he said, fixing a stray lock of my hair that the wind had blown loose. I bet on you. It was the easiest wager I ever made. We walked back inside past the portrait of my grandfather that now hung in the lobby where my father's picture used to be. Grandpa looked stern in the painting, but I knew if you looked closely at his eyes, he was laughing. I walked out of the building and into the sunlight. The flashbulbs popped. The crowd cheered. I saw the employees of Sterling shipping men and women whose pensions I had saved, whose jobs I had secured clapping with genuine enthusiasm. I wasn't the scapegoat. I wasn't the invisible daughter. I walked up to the podium. I adjusted the microphone. I looked out at the sea of faces, and then I looked directly into the camera lens, breaking the fourth wall of my life. They told me I was worth nothing. I said to the crowd and to the world. They gave me an envelope and laughed, but they forgot that paper cuts deeper than knives, and the person who holds the pen writes the history. I smashed the champagne bottle against the hull of the ship. I chose my family, I thought as I looked at Julian applauding in the front row. And more importantly, I chose myself. Clara's journey from the overlooked daughter to the CEO of her own destiny teaches us a brutal but beautiful truth. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love us the most are the ones holding us back the hardest. We often spend years shrinking ourselves to fit into spaces where we don't belong, hoping that if we just work harder, stay quieter, or give more, they will finally see our value. But as Clara learned in that cold mahogany boardroom, you cannot force someone to respect you if they are committed to misunderstanding you. Her grandfather's envelope wasn't just a notification of wealth, it was a mirror. It forced Clara to stop waiting for a seat at a table where she was never welcome and instead build her own table. It reminds us that true power isn't about being the loudest person in the room like her father or the most flashy like her sister. True power is patience. It is observation. It is the quiet confidence to walk away from environments that poison your spirit. You don't need $1 billion trust fund to have your own Clara moment. You just need the courage to realize that you are the CEO of your own life. You have the executive power to fire the people who drain you, to evict the negativity from your mind, and to promote the people, your chosen family, who truly see you. Clara didn't just inherit money. She inherited her self-worth. And that is an inheritance that every single one of you can claim today, right now, without anyone's permission. If this story of justice, resilience, and reclaiming your power ignited a fire in you, please share this video with someone who needs to hear this message today. You never know whose life you might change just by reminding them that they are worth more than how they are treated. And if you are hungry for more stories where the underdog finally bites back, you need to click the video appearing on your screen right now. It is a powerful saga about a devoted wife who was discarded for a younger model, only to reveal that she held the patent to her husband's entire business. Trust me, the ending is even more satisfying than this one. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a chapter of our journey together. I'll see you in the next video.